Hey friends, Marc Clebanoff here from Indie Film Ins and Outs, coming to you with a new podcast episode. I think you guys are going to get a lot out of this one today. I have my friend and colleague Colin Geddes joining us. He is going to deep dive and demystify and talk everything film festivals. And trust me, he is the guy to hear it from. So anyway, stick around. And like I said, you're going to get a lot out of this one today. Marc Clebanoff here from Indie Film Ins and Outs, and joining me today is my guest, Colin Geddes. Thank you for joining us live from Toronto. Thanks for joining me. Good to see you.
A pleasure.
Yeah, so interesting story. I was at TIFF last year at the Toronto International Film Festival, scoping it out, doing some business, and you approached me on the street and introduced yourself, and we ended up having a drink and getting to know each other. And you have a really fascinating track record within the industry, and I thought it would be really applicable for my followers and our group. So having said that, why don't you kind of jump in and give us a little bit about your background?
Certainly. So yeah, I'm Toronto based, and for 20 years I was a programmer at TIFF. So like 80, oh geez, 90, 89, 91, 97. It says my manager in the next room. 97 to 2016. I was the programmer of the Midnight Madness selection. So if you don't know what the Midnight Madness selection is every night during the Toronto National Film Festival, they show a wild, crazy horror film, action film, black comedy from around the world.
Okay.
And this is where a lot of stuff kind of broke out while as the programmer. Eli Roth got his start in Midnight Madness. Cabin Fever, it was a blind submission. It came, I rescued that from the reject bin, or rescued a VHS tape, and I platformed it.
So when you so just sorry to cut you off, but so somebody reviewed the film, passed on it, and then you took a second look at it and brought it back and basically springboarded Eli Roth's career.
Exactly. Yeah. And I mean, he's given me credit for that in press a number of times. So yeah, I was in charge of a selection of 10 films, and then it grew. I was doing other films outside of the Midnight Madness selection. So I would usually have around 15 to 17 films a year that I would hand select and platform, introduce into the world, bringing these films to their audience for the first time, bringing these films to distributors for the first time. And I really saw the kind of the evolution, kind of the acceptance of kind of genre films into the mainstream. I left in 2016 because at that point I was doing some other things. I was working for Shudder, the AMC-owned horror streaming platform.
Yep.
And I was also consulting with various productions on marketing and distribution and festival strategies, and also working with a lot of other people on the development of their projects. So it was kind of 20 years of being able to do one thing really good, and then jumping from that to use the tools in my tool belt to help filmmakers move on to connect their films with audiences.
Okay. So I have a lot to cover here because obviously everything we talk about is very distribution driven. Our whole program is designed around like helping people understand the real mechanics of how the business side of show business works. But obviously the festival circuit, there's a lot of demystifying I think that needs to happen when it comes to the festival circuit. Everybody is Sundance bound or whatever. So especially when it comes to like the realities of the submission process, and I know you've not only worked at a top tier festival, you were also the director of a smaller independent, more regional festival as well, correct?
Yeah, I was a director of a festival called Action Fest that ran for 3 to 4 years in Asheville, North Carolina.
Okay.
And my partner in that was Tom Quinn, who now works for Neon. At the time, he was working for Magnolia. And I've been involved in a lot of different festivals over the years, and often give advice and consulting on how to help to get people to start their own festivals. But yeah, it's a big mystery on how you get your film into one of these festivals, and also, is that festival going to be the right festival for your film?
Yeah, yeah. So, I think one thing that people, everybody has an idea like they want to go to Sundance or one of these top tier festivals, but and correct me if I'm wrong, most of the top tier festivals, they choose different themes and whatnot to focus on an annual basis, which could qualify or disqualify a really good film because maybe it doesn't fit into that year's agenda. Is there any truth to that, or is that
Yeah, yeah, I mean, it's not so much a theme. Like a festival is not going to set it with a theme, but we have seen in the last 10 years, like a move to kind of like gender parity. We're like, okay, look, we need to have more female directors. We need to have more diverse voices. So that's just kind of a shift within the industry. But a festival like TIFF or like Sundance or Berlin doesn't necessarily have a theme year to year. However, there are programming trends. And you'll start to see different voices internationally get accepted or come up. I mean, it's funny because we look at like the success of Parasite and Squid Game.
Mhm.
Well, up until like really, I would say almost like 2000, uh, there were no major Korean films that were hitting the festivals. And then that industry grew. And so you would start seeing films from Korea more and more on the international stage. So there's trends internationally, but also trends within the independent world. And I mean, the big thing is a lot of people think that it's who you know if you want to get into a festival. And in some respect, that's true. Um,
Yeah, I mean, touch on that. How political is it? If somebody, gets into a big festival, does that mean they're kind of grandfathered in future years of that festival? I mean, I know that early in my career, I was playing at kind of some mid-level festivals and I wasn't guaranteed a slot at that festival every time I had a new film, but it was a lot easier for me because I had the relationship and whatnot for me or my team to be able to reach out to that festival. And sometimes it worked out, sometimes it didn't. But at that high level, I mean, how relationship driven is it really?
Yeah, it is very relationship driven, but at the same time, programmers, and I'm speaking for kind of like the top tier legitimate festivals, programmers are always looking to discover and break new talent.
Hmm.
Okay. And so they're looking for that discovery. Um, Films get brought their way and they're directed to certain films, but at the end of the day, it is usually the programmer's kind of choice and decision. However, okay, let me try and
Well,
if
also,
you
how about this? Why don't you walk us through like when a blind submission comes in, somebody that doesn't have the relationships, like Eli Roth's film originally, comes in, what's the process it goes through? Like how many eyeballs are getting on it? How many decision makers are taking a look at it? Like what's kind of
yeah.
the assembly line?
Okay, so if a film comes in blind, so there's no recommendation, it's not coming from anyone, it's like they've submitted, they've paid their submission fee, and it comes in. Um, the first wave are usually what's called pre-screeners. Okay. So there's a body, there's a committee, and they watch everything. And the people who are watching films are usually young cinephiles. They know their way around the world cinema stage,
Yeah.
independent films, and they'll watch a film and they're like, okay, is it a good film? Is it a good story? Are there any actors of note? Is it hitting any issues of topic? They'll grade the film and it'll either go to another pre-screener or it'll go in the reject bin. So it depends on what that festival does. So say that you did a teenage sex comedy,
Mhm.
okay? Like an American Pie on a budget.
Right.
You submit it to TIFF, it's going to go in the reject bin, especially if there's no actors, but also because that's not the kind of film that plays at TIFF.
Yeah.
Okay? Mainstream broad comedies usually don't play at TIFF.
Well, I mean,
Oh,
it's kind of the same rules apply when it comes to distribution. Just because, I kind of like everybody targets Sundance or TIFF or whatever in the festival circuit, everybody in their minds, it's like Sony, Lionsgate, it's you got to know how to target the right places that are going to respond to the type of film that you've made.
Exactly. I was talking about sales agents as like expert fishermen. It was like, look, I don't know how to catch a pike. I don't know how to catch a swordfish, but but salespeople know how to bait for that.
Yeah.
They know how to bait the hook for those distributors and also those territories. So it's a similar thing for festivals. So, okay, so that say that your film did have one of those things. You had a really compelling story, you had a really compelling director's vision. Um, then it would go to another pre-screener. It would basically start kind of getting voted on and slowly moving up the ranks to one of the main programmers. And they're either going to see it and like it or not like it. Like is it going to fit with their tastes? Okay. Um,
So
but
every film, at least in a big festival environment, is going to get seen by multiple people and sensibilities.
it should, yeah, it should be seen at least by one person, if not more. Okay. So, but I mean, they're gonna have their checklist of what they're looking
Sure.
for what's a festival film. Okay. And look, I mean, if it's a low budget horror film, like a slasher film, it's probably going to go right into the reject bin unless they have a specific program that looks at these films. But again, it's got to be something new and something fresh.
Yeah.
So for me, I mean, I worked in the Midnight Madness realm, that was the program. And so I saw a lot of bad horror films and I was looking for something good.
Yeah.
Um, I would always, I think I was very rare as a programmer because I'd look at films and I understand how hard it is to make a film. And I'm not going to just like immediately discount a film. Like the fact that they submitted the film, it made sense from point A to point B narrative. It takes a lot of work to do it, and they've submitted it. I'm going to give it the respect it needs, and I'm going to watch the film. If I know what my audience wants, and so I'm going to be able to kind of judge it on that. But I guess back to how we're talking about relationships is
Uh-huh.
there's a lot of noise. A lot. I mean, if you look at the numbers of films that were submitted to Sundance alone this year, they
Yeah.
published the numbers,
Thousands.
and it's like, and then you look at how many actually get picked. It's a lottery. Okay.
Yeah.
So for these films to kind of push upstream, it is in respect who they know. Okay. So films that come in and directed to the pre-screeners and to the programmers coming from established sales agents, coming from national cinema bodies or
Well, let me
uh,
ask you this. Like this
yeah,
past TIFF, I remember Reptile was one of the big films. That's a big Netflix film, A-list movie. I mean, does Netflix or do they have just the bat phone that they're able to call up TIFF and go, "Hey, it's us. Can you slot our movie in?" Or do they have to go through the submission process the same way, knowing
they
that
have
they're
to
likely going to
go.
get
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, look, if it's coming from a studio, if it's coming from an established direct distributor, yeah, there's going to be more of a chance of getting attention to
it?
that
Yeah,
film. Okay, yeah, they're going to like if and here's the thing is all the festivals every year they're having meetings with all the distributors, with all the agencies. They're coming to them with like, hey, here are the films that we want you to consider. Okay. So in many respects, they're butting in line, but they're butting in line because they have reputation and they have stake in the game and they've proven themselves in the past. But it doesn't mean that automatically their film's going to get in. Okay. There isn't that degree of kind of like nepotism or relations where it's like, oh, so and so is going to phone the head of this festival and their film's in.
got it.
Uh,
So talk about you had mentioned cast before. I mean, I know as a sales agent and distribution professional, like if I got 10 films to watch, the ones with notable cast are going to get, first priority view.
yeah, they're going to rise to the top.
Same,
Yeah.
same rules apply with festivals.
Yeah, to some degree. I mean, there's different kinds within a festival, there's different kinds of films they're looking for. Okay.
Hmm.
A festival is going to want to find films that are going to get their festival attention. Okay. So let's say that those are the red carpet films. Okay. Those are the gala films. So they want something which has got an actor, a hook, something that's going to be easy to sell.
Yeah.
Oh, we have such and such a movie. It's got Michelle Pfeiffer in it. Oh, we've got such and such a movie. It's got Brad Pitt in it. It's like, whatever. I mean, those are two very different actors. Michelle Pfeiffer hasn't done a lot lately, but is a recognizable name.
Yeah.
Okay. So they're going to look for something that gets them marquee value and gets them the press and the attention. But then at the same time, they're going to have other programs for breaking out fresh new talent. I mean, think about it. Like Reservoir Dogs had to come from somewhere. Okay.
Yeah.
Like I remember, this is a good story. I remember as an audience member at TIFF around like 1991, seeing this scruffy guy in lineups at all the films I was going to. And I thought he was like a hungover journalist. Okay. And then I go see Reservoir Dogs, and this scruffy guy I've seen in lineups gets up and introduces the film. No one knew who Tarantino was. Okay. And then suddenly, like, boom, that film got discovered. Okay. Um, there's a lot of cases like that where you can see like a festival wants to discover and be the first to that discovery of that talent. Okay. So there's going to be other areas within the festival for smaller films, maybe not with recognizable cast. There's going to be an area for documentaries. Okay. But there's also going to be the tentpole stuff.
Yeah.
Okay. So you need to understand where your film will place at that festival. Is it a festival which is only taking, like, only trying to showcase red carpet stuff? Or are they a serious kind of artistic driven festival? Um, I mean, there's a festival, there's literally a festival for kind of for every film. So,
Yeah, which I think is kind of the upside of, everybody obviously gets their sights set on the big ones, but most of us end up playing at the smaller, more regional fests, the mid-level fests. I mean, what in your opinion are the upsides to those festivals that are not top tier?
um, you can, if you've got a good film, you can cut through the noise, okay? And you can find where your audience is. If you're a small film and you're at a big festival, you're competing for attention.
Mm,
And it is hard because you've got all these bigger films that are just like sucking up all the air. Okay. Um, but then I mean you get stuff like, I mean, within Sundance, I mean, something like, look, Little Miss Sunshine, like the breakout kind of indie hit. There's certain films that kind of get through that,
yeah.
but at a smaller festival or a smaller regional film festival, you can really find your kind of groundswell audience. They're more, in some respects, like kind of broad test screenings where you can kind of figure out like who is this film for and where's the path going to go next. And you can foster a lot of relationships. I've seen a lot of filmmakers kind of do alternative distribution through working smaller festivals, not getting their sights on the stars, but realizing, look, let's actually try and get our films out there and get them seen and discover the audience.
Yeah, of course. So as far as distribution, would you say that acceptance into a big film festival automatically equates to lucrative distribution? That's kind of
No,
yeah, it's something I specifically want you to demystify.
it will help. It'll help because, like, oh, this film has been validated by someone.
Right.
Okay. It's been validated by an organization, but it's not a Willy Wonka golden ticket to distribution. I mean, pay attention to IndieWire, and at the end of the year, they publish a list of like, here's 20 great films we saw on the festival circuit that don't have distribution. Why? Happens a lot, and I've actually seen uh films lose deals because they're waiting out for what they think is going to be a big deal.
Yeah,
There
interesting.
was one
Look,
film
I
there.
know a lot. Yeah, I have a lot of colleagues who are domestic distributors who, they'll pick up a Sundance movie or they'll pick up a big ticket festival movie. And then once they actually release it, they're really deflated at how little business it does. I mean, there's that happens quite often too. Just because something resonates in the festival circuit doesn't mean it's going to resonate in the mainstream.
Yeah, there is this kind of like, look, you put anything in front of a festival audience, they're going to give it a standing ovation. And in some respects, that is kind of true because festival audiences are already geared up and salivating and wanting to have an experience.
Hmm.
And that might not translate to the average ticket buyer, but
Yeah.
also depends on how the film is marketed and distributed. Um, but yeah, it's and I've seen producers who one film where they had a cast, like a member of the cast who was like a small player in Twilight. And they were holding out because they thought they were going to get a big lucrative deal. And they missed a whole bunch of other deals because they were waiting on this one thing which never happened.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's also just kind of going into a festival. You've got to have a strategy of what you want the festival to do for your film and what you want your film to do for you ultimately. But that's another conversation there.
Well, that's a good conversation, though. I mean, talk a little bit about what can filmmakers do to best prepare to take the most advantage of the festival experience, in your opinion? And also,
I
on
always
the same note, are there other things that they can do in the submission process to kind of like make themselves more visible or cut in line, so to speak?
Okay, so yeah, let's do that, and then we'll talk about if your
Okay.
film does get into a festival. So, okay, if you're trying to get into a festival, the best thing to do is to find a comparable film. Okay, look at your film honestly and compare it to something else that's similar and try and successful. Okay, and try and see, well, where did that film go? Okay, what festival did that film get selected at? What distributor picked it up? Like, okay, like we've got a film like this. Well, you're trying to figure out where the audience is and who, how can you kind of piggyback on someone else's market research
Yeah.
to find out where, okay?
Yeah, it's a good way
So
to put
like,
it.
okay, I've got this film and it's similar to this film, which went to this festival and this festival. Okay, so submit to those festivals. Now, the way that most people submit to film festivals these days is Film Freeway, which is easy, but kind of takes and it takes the middleman out of it all. You submit right to the festival, but you can't just leave it at that. Okay. If you submit through Film Freeway, you actually should also reach out directly to that festival to let them know that you've submitted the film. Don't count on just the blind Film Freeway. You've got, because their inbox and their screener list is just flooded with stuff. And especially it's flooded with other filmmakers and producers who might not even be aware that their film doesn't even fit for that festival.
Yeah.
The number of films that I saw that had no idea. So it was for a very specific program, and it would get films submitted to me where I'm like, you just submitted like a beautiful lesbian melodrama love story to directly to Midnight Madness. That's not the kind of film we play. Like I remember one film which was like there's a film and it was basically a courtroom drama. And I'm like, guys, you haven't done your due diligence. You haven't done your research to see what kind of films does this program within this festival or this festival itself actually pick. Okay. So
I get the same thing all the time. People submitting looking for a sales agent, and they'll literally send me an email saying, we think this would be a great fit for your lineup. And then I look at the film, I'm like, you clearly didn't look at my lineup. You
yeah,
clearly
exactly.
didn't bother to go on the website and see the types of films that we deal with. So yeah,
It's as we
it
know,
really comes
there's
down
a
to just like
great
doing your homework.
yeah, it's doing your homework. I mean, I always tell people too, it's like, you know what? Reach out to producers of these. Like if you're getting a comparable film, reach out to the producers of that film. Everyone wants to tell war stories. Ask them about how their festival journey was, and you'll probably get some insight from that. So if you can narrow it down to figure out who the person was who invited that film, and when I say that, oftentimes the film festivals they'll have the note. They'll be on you can look up the film, you can see the note the synopsis, which was written for the film festival, it's usually signed by the person who selected the film. If you can find the programmer, reach out to them. Reach out to them and say, hey, just want to like flag that I made this film, sent it your way. Hope you have a chance to watch it. I know a lot of directors who get really nervous about that, but I'm like, that's a programmer's job. A programmer is to watch a film. A
Yeah.
programmer's job is to discover new talent. A programmer's job is to engage with artists. And you also have to be a bit of a self-promoter. Okay.
Sure.
And if you're able to have someone else who can help you do that, I've had producers write me letters which just cut through the line because they were really passionate about the film and why I should see it and why this was important. Okay. So figure out if you can have any kind of influencers, endorsers who can come to help you with that.
Or like publicists, does that help as well?
A publicist will help. A publicist will usually help more when the film gets selected. And so that's like once you get into a film festival, then you might want to enlist a publicist. But a publicist, unless you hire someone who has relations with the festivals. But I mean, there are various, there's a number of people who kind of will do that. But again, it's a hard thing. It's a hard bubble, honestly, to get into the programmer bubble. But there are steps that you can do just being a filmmaker, doing your due diligence to say, hey, letting you know I submitted this film, just putting it on your radar. Now, the good thing about that is, and I'm speaking from personal experience, is I've had filmmakers do that before. And if anytime a filmmaker, and this is just how I did it personally, anytime a filmmaker reached out to me cold, saying that they're submitting a film, I sent them a waiver. I sent them a free code so they wouldn't have to pay the submission fee. Because I'm like, you know what? You've got the gumption, you got the chutzpah to reach out to me in the first place. So I'm going to throw you one back. Okay. Because I know how hard it is to do that. I'm like,
Yeah.
I pay attention to the film and maybe it's going to work out. Maybe it might be interesting. But what I will do is even if I don't select the film, maybe the film is of note. Programmers know other programmers.
Yeah.
Okay. And I might pass that on to another festival, say, you know what? I wasn't able to pick this film, but you know what? You should have a look at this because it's probably going to be a fit for you. And that's something I would often do. Or that director was on my radar.
Mm-hmm.
So the next time he submitted a film, I paid attention. And there are a number of directors who I rejected their first film or their second film. And then I picked their third film or I picked their second film. Okay. There's one director in particular, Jim Mickle. I rejected his first film, Mulberry Street. He sent a very impassioned letter. I selected his second film, Stakeland. And he went on to do Cold in July with Don Johnson and the lead actor from Dexter. And now he's done 2 seasons of Sweet Tooth, which is a hugely popular Netflix series, which was shot in New Zealand.
Okay.
But he was able to cut through by having the chutzpah to write me a letter.
Yeah.
And so he was on my radar.
As a programmer, are you an anomaly? I mean, you were 20 years at TIFF. I mean, what's the typical turnaround for a programmer in order to
TIFF was,
develop those relationships, you know?
yeah, TIFF is maybe kind of I mean, it's a very special place. And that's the thing is that programmers handle their relationships. They grow them. So when I sat down, let's look at it this way. How did I select films? At the beginning of the year, or actually all year round, I had a tracking list. So if I heard of a new film under production, I'd write it down.
Mm-hmm.
I'd find out like, okay, who's the director, who's the producer? Is there a sales agent on board? I get all that information. And then I'd be getting more titles sent to me and information sent to me from agents at CAA, ICM, William Morris, Endeavor, etc. Then I'd also get information sent to me from cultural film bodies. Like there's this hot film coming from Belgium. There's this hot film coming from Korea. Okay. Then I'd be getting also information from producers I know. So I tap into that whole network to learn about what new films, and we're talking about, again, specifically horror films, action films, black comedies in this world. There was a fresh crop for that year.
Is it an annual position? I mean, are you working for TIFF year round? Back to
Yeah,
school
yeah, I
work?
was working basically, I mean, I was working year round always. It was something that I liked doing. I liked keeping on top of this stuff and tracking this stuff. And so I'd be able to kind of take my database of films and plunk it into the job that I was doing as a programmer.
I see. Gotcha. So now going back to once a film and a filmmaker is selected, what's the best advice you could give for, what they can do once they show up to, you know, uh, make themselves seen, make themselves heard, and make the most of the experience?
So yeah, get a publicist, get a seasoned festival publicist, someone who knows this world, knows who the press are, who will gonna write about it and champion your film.
Mhm.
The festival will have its public screenings and have press screenings or have industry screenings, and the festival will do as much as they can to promote it, but you really have to bring your own team to help promote it.
Yeah, I
Uh,
always say you can't rely on the festival, especially smaller ones, to fill the theater for you. You
yeah,
really do kind of have to hustle to get butts and seats.
and I've seen films show up with like going around to the whole town, putting up posters,
Mhm.
uh, giving out postcards on the streets. So much stuff. I mean, there was an indie film. This is a great story. There's an indie film, All the Boys Love Mandy Lane, and they had made these blood stains, these plastic blood stains that they were able to affix to the sidewalk. And it looked like this weird smear of blood, and boom, there was the name of their film with the time that it was screening, that the big splat of blood. And they came up with that great thing. There were so many kind of crazy fun, like temporary tattoos, like that people would give out on the streets, like so many fun, crazy things to promote their film and the screening.
Yeah.
Okay. Because you really have to kind of, so it's kind of like a publicist and kind of like someone kind of help out with marketing who's had experience in this world. And then if you're making a film, you need to have with your cast, like that if you get in a festival, like one of the expectations is that you'll try your darndest to come to that film festival.
Yeah.
Might not be able to like pay for you to get there, but look, any actor, like I've had so many films where an actor would show up and who was not maybe a marquee actor, but they had a great time. They were able to participate in the introduction and the Q&A, and it's about them getting themselves on the radar. And then suddenly you see them move ahead within that world because they're getting recognized.
Yeah.
Uh, that's happened a number of times where it's like, oh, this person just showed up because they were able to, because they wanted to promote the film and promote themselves.
And when we talk, to filmmakers about how do you attach talent, I mean, early in my career, I met some really prominent talent at some small festivals. I was able to build and nurture those talent relationships directly with actors who are at a festival. So, that can
Yeah,
be potentially big upside.
yeah, it's crazy. When I flip through the book, like oh, the photos, like the actors and the people that I was able to meet, even before, like honestly, even before I started working for the film festival. Okay. Before I started working for the film festival, like my background, I'm not a film student. I was just passionate about films. I started writing about films. I started writing a magazine about Asian films. Okay. And I got a press pass to the Toronto International Film Festival. So I'd go and see as many films as I can. It was like a smorgasbord. It was a buffet. I just watch all these films and I'd see and meet people. I'd grow my network. And I remember one year I saw this amazing horror film from Mexico. And I got to talk to the director and I talked to him about my passion, which was like these crazy films from Hong Kong. And he loved those films too. And we went and we did an interview in a rundown donut coffee shop right beside the big fancy hotel. Like a 2 hour interview just talking about films and that was maybe 1991.
Mhm.
Okay. To that day, we are still friends. We run into each other all the time. I mean, then later on, I went into the film festival world, so I got to know him even more. That's Guillermo del Toro. I met Guillermo del Toro when he made his first film, Cronus, and it played at TIFF because he was a first-time director. He was new to the festival circuit. I got access because I asked a good question during the Q&A, and we started talking about it after the film in the lobby, and that turned into a friendship. And so, I mean, look, if you're an actor or a director and you want to progress, and I'm saying this as a natural way, not kind of like as a scuzzy kind of networking schmoozy thing. If you want to progress as an artist, find your local film festival and support it. Go to it. Because a lot of these festivals have industry components for actors and directors and producers that you don't need to be part of the scene. You can go and you'll learn stuff from Q&As after the films. Sometimes they have sessions and panels and discussions. There's so many benefits of going to a local film festival if you're an artist and you want to learn about the industry and get involved in the industry.
Yeah, it's an obvious place to insert yourself into the environment if you have zero relationships.
Yeah. Oh, this is a crazy story. So I got lots of crazy stories. There was an independent film, no budget film called Horrible Way to Die.
Mhm.
All right. I saw it. I thought it was super smart. It was a real clever twist on the kind of like the serial killer thriller. It wasn't a Midnight Madness film. It was in the regular section of the film festival, and really fun, tight little film. And we had the screening. We were at one like a multiplex here in Toronto, and afterwards the director and cast were just kind of like mulling around talking about where they were going to go next. It was a really good screening, and then I looked over and like, is that Bobcat Goldthwait? Remember the comedian?
Sure. Who became a documentarian.
Yeah, he made there was like a film he made with like Robin Williams, which played at Sundance, World's
Yeah.
Greatest Dad.
Yep.
And he was just like standing in the lobby. I'm like, who did you guys invite him? Like, no. He was in Toronto and wanted to see a film at the festival and picked that one because it had a crazy title and joined with the party, like not the party, but just like hung out with the director and everyone afterwards. And that made a friendship that they were able to tap into later. And that
Yeah.
director, Adam Wingard, so that was a no budget film he made, which started at the film festival. He's got a film coming out in March, a little film called Kong X Godzilla. It's the director
Yeah.
of the new Kong, and like,
Wow.
but he started with like a no budget film. However, yeah, it's just such an open playing field. And in some respects, that's the advantage of going to a smaller festival, is that you can develop these relationships and you can develop this network without, in many respects, the same kind of pressure or the same kind of noise as a big film festival.
Yeah. So now talk about the transition from spending years curating for a big film festival and then going into an actual distribution platform like Shudder and basically doing the same job, but obviously very different directives, I would imagine.
Yeah, so I moved on to work with Shudder, and that was really interesting because I was like, okay, I can take a film, platform it, and introduce it to an audience. But Shudder was letting me do that on a bigger scale. It was
Yeah.
essentially looking for a distributor. So in the beginning, Shudder was strictly just a library service. They didn't have any new films. And it was kind of this exercise that we did where we're like, okay, we're building an online video store. At this point, it was really like there was Netflix. There were a couple of other streamers, but we were very specific. We were just doing
What
horror
year did you
films.
go there?
I started, well, let me ask what year did I start at Shudder? 2013.
Okay.
2013.
Yeah. That was a
Uh,
different era.
Very different era. I mean, at that point, Netflix wasn't doing horror films. For horror films, like, oh, you like horror films? Well, there's a bunch of zombie films over there.
Yeah.
Like, it wasn't the Mike Flan. I mean, here we go. Mike Flanagan, who's done all these great series for Netflix, all these great horror series. he was a Midnight Madness discovery with his film Oculus, which was the second film he made. So he started Midnight Madness. Uh, yeah, I could boast about Saw. Saw played in Midnight Madness. Insidious played in Midnight Madness, and Insidious was different than what went to theaters. I showed a different version of Insidious, which they were still kind of workshopping. But anyways, at the time, Netflix, there wasn't a player in the horror film space. So we were really looking at how to kind of capitalize on that. Okay, let's niche down and just do horror films. And we started like, well, think about this service as, and at that point, when we first started, they didn't even have the name. They didn't even have a name for the service. It was like AMC's horror film streaming service.
Yeah.
And we're like, but we're building an online video store. How many films do we need to have here for you to come back? So let's think about it if it was a physical store. If there's a video store in your neighborhood, how many films would they need to have on the shelves to keep you coming back each week, each
Yeah.
day? We kind of settled like, okay, like maybe around 500.
And it's not even just what's on the shelf, it's how often you're getting new stuff.
Exactly. So we've got like, let's start with this and let's make sure that we have new titles. And at that point, it was catalog stuff, library. But we also had to make sure that we were being conscious and curating what we were putting on the service. Because as you know, with horror films, there's a lot of crap out there. And horror film fans are discerning. That's a very discerning audience because they will sit through crap to watch a good kill or a good monster.
Mm-hmm.
So they know good from bad. And so when they're watching a film and it's actually good, everyone gets really excited. Okay.
Yeah.
So we had to make sure that we were picking quality films, not just bargain basement crap.
Yeah.
Okay. So really making sure like, oh yeah, this is like a cool video store. This is kind of like building credibility. And then after a while, once they built their audience that way, they started adding in new films, picking up new films as a distributor, and then moving into actually producing their own films, which is where they are now. So now they're an active player on the distribution scene, putting in bids going up against films that are going to Netflix, going to Lionsgate, going to
Yeah, I mean,
E1.
I'm familiar with the Shudder original numbers. It's no joke. They're
Yeah,
the real deal.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I worked with them, basically help kind of like launching the service and then kind of guiding it through. And then I left actually just recently. I left recently to just pursue other avenues. I've kind of done that for just almost 10 years. So figuring out how to kind of like do more work with filmmakers, helping them connect with an audience, kind of more on a one.
We're gonna touch on that a little bit more in depth before we wrap up. I have a couple final quick film festival queries for you.
Yeah.
You know, one thing you always hear people talk about is premiere status. I know the big festivals require it. What's kind of the whole thing with your premiere status? And how is
Yeah.
it, what's the best strategy to exploit it?
You need to figure out who you're going to give your first screening to. So if you break it down, there's the world premiere. That's the first time the film is screened anywhere. Okay. It's not a cast and crew screening, but this is your first public
Public
screening.
screening.
Okay. And I see people who kind of will screw up with that because they do, oh, we booked it at this movie theater. I'm like, well, that's essentially as soon as you're doing a public screening, if you're doing a small cast and crew, a private cast and crew screening, no, that's not your premiere. That's a cast and crew screening. But the first time it's advertised to the public, tickets are on sale, that's a world premiere. So you can have your world premiere at a film festival in the States, in Canada, in England, anywhere around the world. Okay. Then the next one would be international premiere. So that's going to be your first screening outside of the country of origin. So if you've made a film and you're American and you've had a screening in London, well, you've had your world premiere and your international premiere. Okay. But you still have your North American premiere and your US premiere. It just starts kind of getting smaller and smaller by country and by region. But you don't want to blow your first two screenings. You don't want to blow your world premiere or your international premiere on a festival that won't do your film any service. Um, Again, it's the research to figure out like, well, what journalists go to this festival? What distributors go to this festival? What films have played here and gone on to other places in the past? Uh, what films has this festival premiered in the past? That'll give you a really good idea of how they're going to service your film. When it starts getting down to kind of regional premieres like West Coast premiere, East Coast premiere, New Jersey, doesn't matter at that point.
Right.
Okay. So, but you want to make sure that those first couple of banners that you get, those laurels, are going to serve your film.
Yeah.
And going to be at the top, not a whole, like, I mean, you know, you'll see a poster and it's just got all these laurels all over it. And like, well, what are the ones that matter? If there's 20 festivals I've never heard of, you need to make sure that
Yep.
you've got.
I see it. I see it all the time, you know, and it's, I mean, it is good for somebody like me who's looking at a film strictly from a distribution perspective. It's nice to know that even if it's been to 20 festivals that are small regional festivals, that it has gotten accepted to 20 festivals. I mean, that
Yeah,
does lend credibility to the merit of the film.
yeah,
But yeah, I mean, if they're not, you know, well-known festivals, it doesn't add much value from a distribution standpoint.
exactly. Yeah, there's almost kind of like there's different kinds of validation where it's
Yeah.
like, okay, there's the easy validation, like, oh, you got into like the Hampton Film Festival. Like
Yeah,
there's like, okay, all right, you got into Santa Monica. Okay, you got into like, there's still competitive festivals,
yeah.
but you got into, and I'm just gonna the Soggy Bottom Creek Film Festival.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Out of curiosity, what's your opinion if you even have one on these online film festivals that have sprung up all over the place? How much validity do you give an online film festival? I mean, because you're completely removing the community aspect of the experience.
Yeah, it depends. I mean, it depends on the film. Like there has been a success with a certain kind of online film festival, which is niching down, and like Human Rights Film Festival, showing films like basically they're able to connect maybe an audience that is widespread. Like the audience for that might not exist in a single city,
mm,
but they're able to reach a wider audience. But you've got to do your research to see like look up the lineup from the year before or the year before and reach out to some of those producers and say, hey, did that festival do anything for your film?
yeah.
Like, I'm always surprised how many producers don't talk to other producers. Like, all the information is on the IMDb. You can reach out to a film and say, hey, what was your experience like at this film festival? Everyone loves to talk about
Yeah, well, I say that a lot. I mean, you know, your biggest resource is always other filmmakers as a filmmaker, because as much as filmmakers like to kind of like, you know, puff their chest and make themselves seem bigger than they are, everybody, no filmmaker is going to be unwilling to share with other filmmakers their experiences about who's a good distributor, who's a bad distributor, who's a good sales agent, who's a bad sales agent, what's a
Yeah.
good festival, what's a bad festival. They love to share that feedback.
Yep, exactly. So yeah, it just really depends again on the film with an online film festival.
Yeah. Out of curiosity, did you see, I believe it was Burt Reynolds' last film. I think it was called The Last Movie Star, or it was a thing about an aged iconic actor who, you know, is well past his prime, and he gets invited to a film festival to receive a Lifetime Achievement Award. And have you seen this film?
No, no.
Do yourself a favor. It was, like I said, if not his last, one of his last films. And basically, you know, they say past recipients, Clint Eastwood, Robert De Niro, blah, blah, blah. And he gets talked into going, and, you know, it's nothing's first class. And he gets there, and it's a couple of nerdy guys projecting films on a bed sheet in a comic book store. And he goes,
Yeah.
you said you gave awards to Clint Eastwood and De Niro. He said, but yeah, but they didn't actually show up. Anyway, but it's got a beautiful arc. It's a really good, I mean, piece of, you know, character performance for Burt Reynolds. But like I said, one of his last films, and you of all people, I think, would appreciate it.
Well, that's the thing. Is like that's such a real aspect of this problem with film festivals is do the research. I mean, we recently had a client and we got accepted into a film festival, and we reached out to the film festival because we are just kind of weighing our options. And they came back and like, hey, just so you know, our screening room is like 120 seats. And like, we're not like, we're not a big red carpet festival. Like they were really honest about who they were and they were tempering our expectations. Because the last thing you want is a film to roll in and like, oh, wait, you don't have a red carpet.
Yeah.
You're in like a screening in a strip mall, but you know, it's
Yeah, I
but you
mean,
just
I look years ago, I took a film that I produced to what I thought was a pretty legitimate LA-based film festival, and we showed up with our cast, and we had some very prominent cast, and like they had virtually no press. They had a red carpet, but they're like, "Well, you got to bring your own press." We're like, "Well, that would have been nice." I mean, we brought, I mean, not nobodies, we brought some talent, and
yeah.
it was a lesson learned.
Well, the other danger too, back to the film freeway thing, doing your research is make sure you've got the right film festival. Okay. Like there is
What do you mean? Expand on that. What do you mean?
there are so many uh uh okay Dublin.
Derivatives of big film festivals,
Yeah.
basically.
The Dublin World Film Festival is different than the Dublin International Film Festival. Okay,
Yeah.
there's a whole bunch of these kind of like smaller things where like there's even one where it's like, oh, this is an interesting. Oh, it's actually not even a film festival, really. It's a monthly series that's calling itself a film festival.
Well, there's a
And
Toronto Independent Film Festival. So I've had filmmakers come to me and wave the flag that they're playing at TIFF, and I find out that it's not TIFF.
yeah, it's I've seen that so many, and even within it's interesting because in Sundance you've got Sundance and you've got Slam Dance.
Mhm.
Okay, in Cannes you've got the Cannes Film Festival, Directors Fortnight. Um, there's different incarnations, but Toronto's never really had. There've been always been someone who's been trying to do an upstart, smaller festival, but has never done it. But I mean, there's even I remember doing up a strategy for a client, and I'm like, you know, the Rome International Film Festival is actually in Rome, like New Jersey or whatnot. Like it was literally, it was, you're not going to Italy. You've actually submitted to a festival in the States, in a
Yeah.
town which has the name Rome. Like it's not like, so you've got to do your diligence on this stuff.
Yeah. So in our last few minutes here, let's talk about what you're doing now. Kind of, do you consider yourself a producer rep, or are you festival centric, or what's your focus that you're doing now?
Producer rep is an interesting term for it. I mean, we have come in
You refer to
some,
yourself as a consultant, but kind of
yeah,
explain what it is that you do as a service to
consultant is
film.
the first, is the kind of like the first stop. Okay. But then beyond that, together with my wife, Katerina, we run Ultra 8 Pictures, and we can come in and essentially kind of be like a producer's rep, helping with festival and distribution strategy, helping with materials, marketing. We also come in early on projects and do script reads and script edits, development. Like I said, I've seen so many films within the genre world. When I read a script, I can say, this is fresh, this is old, this is a market trend, this isn't a market trend.
Mm.
So we can insert ourselves at any stage, really, with development and then marketing, festival distribution strategy. But then also we do kind of coaching and management, because a lot of the time it's just giving advice and helping solve problems that filmmakers have. And that's really where we kind of blossom, is being able to kind of be a sounding board for creatives,
Yeah.
and talking through these, identifying problems and talking them through them and finding solutions on how to help them make their films, make their art, and connect with audiences.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, good. And it's going well?
Yeah, it's going well. Yeah, I mean, there's no shortage of interesting and talented people that we're meeting right now. I mean, the biggest one, we came on board a film that didn't have any direction, didn't know what they were doing. It was completed. It was a film called Mad God by Phil Tippett. And if you don't recognize the name Phil Tippett, his work has influenced you regardless.
Mhm.
He's the visual effects stop motion animator who won an Oscar for Star Wars, Jurassic Park. He did the Snow Walkers. He invented Jabba the Hutt. He did the stop motion visual effects for Starship Troopers, RoboCop, all of this stuff. And he had a
So
film that
this
he
was like
made.
his directorial debut.
Yeah, this was his directorial debut. And they had this film and they didn't know what to do with it. How do they get it to an audience? And so we helped with the materials, got them a new trailer, got them a new poster, got them accepted into the Locarno International Film Festival, which is like one of the foremost art house film festivals, helped secure them a distribution deal, basically set everything up for them. And the film, when it got a release, uh, resounding success, like a critical hit. So that's like a great case where we're able to come in and really help with a creator.
Awesome. Anything else you want to touch on before we this went nice and smooth?
Yeah, well, I think it's just with
You're easy to talk to.
film festivals, you just got to do some research, and you've got to. Here's the thing: you've got to go out on a limb. You've got to contact people. You've got to let them know you made something. But you also have to be very humble about that. Okay, so I have gotten letters over my career as a film programmer from like one director in particular who compared his first film, calling it Kubrick-esque. Just slow
I
down.
see it all the time.
Yeah, slow down. Do not put yourself on the same level as a first-time filmmaker, second time, as Scorsese or Kubrick. Okay. And then if you get rejected, be diplomatic.
Mm,
Take it. Take the rejection and move on. I have had a couple of instances where a filmmaker was not happy with me saying no. One filmmaker went to social media and said that I, specifically naming me, had rejected their film. I didn't know that. And suddenly my inbox and my Facebook and my Twitter started blowing up with messages telling me that I didn't know what I was doing and I should lose my job and how dare. I'm like, what is going on? So I had to kind of backpedal. Oh, it's this guy who made this post. Okay. So if we unravel this a little bit more, even if your film gets rejected, I might still recommend it to someone else.
right.
I might have you on the radar. This guy with this one kind of pithy little angry outburst on social media screwed himself from me ever wanting to do anything with him again. But it gets even better. I say it turns out that his dad had a friend who was an entertainment lawyer who went out of his way to bring the film to one of the heads of TIFF. And that's how it got to me to
Mm.
even watch it in the first place. So this kid,
So he just assumed it was getting priority consideration.
his father had pulled strings. And then this whole action, like we literally had to reach out, it's like, hey, you brought this film to us. This filmmaker is being hostile to us. And within 24 hours, those social media posts were scrubbed, and I got an apology from that director. I had another instance in Cannes one night where I was coming home from a long day. I was going back to my hotel room and ran into a bunch of people that I knew on the lawn of one of the hotels, like I think like the Grand,
Yeah.
just saying hi and getting introductions. And this one producer was like, "Oh yeah, you're the guy who rejected my film." Like, it was really kind of hostile about it. And like, I had to go, like, what film? Like, it was just like, you don't, that's not how you behave.
Yeah.
You don't behave. And it was just like, I had to actually, again, backtrack and like, oh, oh, I remember that film. I actually didn't mind that film. And again, that's a film that I recommended to other people, but I had to go to the various people who had endorsed that film and put it on my radar to say, hey, I just met so-and-so, your producer, who was hostile to me because of a decision I made. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, whether it's a festival programmer or a distributor, you should always be diplomatic when it comes to rejections and whatnot, because people move around. Just because somebody's at Shutter now doesn't mean they're not going to be at Paramount tomorrow,
Yeah,
or vice versa. It's like,
it's the nature of the industry where it's like, you know what? The person who brings you coffee, be nice to them because you honestly don't know
correct.
who they are, where they're going. And they don't know who you are or where you're going. So you just gotta assume everyone's got is coming to you with like positive intentions.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So yeah, there's some interesting kind of like after we got offline, we get off this Zoom, we're like, oh, there was this story and this story. Because I've got some interesting war stories and some fun stories about some of the premieres and yeah, and there is a degree of bad behavior I've seen from celebrities that, I can't really talk about.
Yeah, I got a fair amount of those stories myself. Any chance of being in Cannes this year?
I think I'm going to be taking it easy this year. I mean, for me professionally, I like going to Berlin because
Yeah.
I like it doesn't
Are you
have the
going
same
next
kind
month?
of yeah. I'm not going this year, but I usually like going to Berlin because it's just I feel I can get a lot more done. And when you're at the end of the day with Berlin, it's kind of the end of the day. And
Berlin's
can
my favorite market. It's the beginning of the year. People are refreshed from the holidays. It's cold, so they're not out on the beach partying until 5 in the morning. I always find Berlin to be really productive. So I'll be there. I'm excited.
I think that it's with Berlin. I was explaining it to someone why they should go to Berlin because I'm like, look, AFM, anyone can go there. Anyone who's got a producer
Right.
business card, they can go there. Can it's expensive, and a lot of people go there just to be seen. The people who are serious, it kind of cuts through a lot of the noise in Berlin. The people who go there are actively serious, and you tap into a different kind of European distribution system and marketing system too. It's fascinating,
Yeah,
and it's
correct.
different. And the thing is, like, the city of Cannes, it's the same. It never changes. Berlin is dynamic and it's changing. Every year you go, you can find a new restaurant, you can find a new neighborhood. Cannes is just like,
Yeah, it's the same stuff every time.
yeah,
Every year I get there, sit down, have a glass of wine. It's good to be back. By the end of the first full day, I'm ready to go home.
yeah. And then it's because that place doesn't change, it kind of compounds. So if you're there for a week, you feel like you've been there for 4 weeks because it just every experience you have adds up because it's always just rinse and repeat. It's just always the same, that city.
Indeed. All
Yeah.
right. We'll wrap it up on that note. I appreciate you. I'm glad we ran into each other. And I actually, well, we'll see. It's not 100%, but it looks like we're going to be doing a production in Toronto later this year. So if that pans out, we'll hang out quite a bit, I hope.
Sounds great. Well,
All
pleasure
right.
talking to you, and
Yeah,
we'll see
pleasure.
you in
Thank you, Colin
the
Geddes. Thank you very much, sir. And we will talk soon. Thanks again for joining us today, guys. I hope you guys got a lot of good intel out of that back and forth between myself and Colin. If you have any questions, you can always email me, Marc, M-A-R-C, @indiefilminsandouts.com. I will see you guys on the next one.